Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is quite well. We are just loading everybody in, doing the last minute items here that we need. We'll start the program shortly. We're going to have an interactive program today, and we're going to have a couple poll questions through the morning. And the first poll question I'm going to put up just so that everybody gets to see it and get used to some of the poll questions that we'll put up. We have about 5 of them today. The first one here is my favorite cup of coffee is from. You can open the poll now. I'll leave this open for another 2 minutes here. Let me know. And this is Tim Phelps, and I'm glad to be with you guys today.
Stacy. She has a different name.
Hey, Tim, where's Dunkin' Donuts on that list?
Oh, no. Thought I had them all there.
I think you can actually change these polls in real time, right?
Let's
You
see.
have to clear it.
Let me end the poll here and let me edit the poll. And good morning to all too that have just recently joined us. We're just waiting to everybody load in here for another minute, and then we'll start the program. We will have some interactive polls that we'll put up during the presentation. There is also a chat feature on the right-hand side. I know that Brett will touch on this, but as we go through the program, you'll be asked a couple of questions and want your comments. We are recording today's event so that we have this as a public record. And then we will also be posting this in our Monday morning memo for those that have not been able to see it. But if you want to go back and review some of the things, behind the scenes, we do have Allison and John who's going to be monitoring that chat area. But I really do encourage you to provide your feedback as we go through the program. Well, it is that magical hour. It is 8:05. I know that people's time is very precious at this point. We're going to get started here. This is our second of our Zoom breakfasts that we're doing for the community conversation. Today, it is a pleasure to have Barry Seymour, the Executive Director from DVRPC, and Brett Fusco with us. He's the manager for the Office of Long Range Planning. It isn't that far off, but it seems like it's far off 2050. And as we all know, how transportation planning has to be set up. My walk with my wife last night, I was talking to her about this. We do our TIP in 12-year chunks in funding, so we're 2.5 cycles away for that. So we're right around the corner. During the program, we'll have a couple of polls that we'll put up for your feedback, and then at the end we'll have time for some Q&A. Again, I do encourage you to put your responses into the chat area, and I have an announcement to make at the end and a plea. So as we wrap up, I will put that forward. So with great pleasure, I introduce to you Barry Seymour. Barry, it's all yours.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Here I am. So thanks, Tim. I just wanted to thank you and the TMA team for having us this morning, and appreciate everybody who's joined us. I see we have 56 people on the call this morning, so that's great. In addition to myself and Brett, I also have Allison Hastings, who's our manager of the Office of Communications and Engagement, and Stacy Bartels, who's the manager of the Office of Marketing and Commuter Services. So it's going to be a team effort for us this morning. So Tim had asked me to talk a little bit about regional planning in the context of a post-COVID world. And the good news is eventually there will be a post-COVID world. Bad news is we just don't know when that's going to be. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more today. Next, thanks. So those of you who don't know, DVRPC, we provide planning services for 9-county bi-state region, Southeast Pennsylvania and Southern New Jersey. It's a big, complex region, tough to manage. So much happens at the municipal level, but we try to work with all of our partners at the county level, local level, the states, the DOTs, the transit agencies. A lot of players go into doing this, so we know that we can only do things on a cooperative basis. Next slide. Oh, one more. Thanks. Oh, my poll keeps popping up. So we know that make that poll go away. So we know that our post-COVID world will be different, right? I say don't make weather forecasts during a hurricane, right? When you're in the middle of the storm, nobody wants to hear that next week it's going to be sunny and warm. And frankly, it's hard to even imagine what next week is going to look like because you're just in the heart of it. So but what we want to do and what we need to do is to think long term. Next. Continue to use data to make decisions. Don't get caught up in the moment. Look at the data, follow the facts. That means both the conditions before, during, and after this phase, and that's a key part of the way we make decisions. Next. There's certainly been mistakes all around as we've gone through this process, but there's also been successes. If you're a business, did you figure out how to do telecommuting and remote access? If you're a public agency, have you figured out how to accept applications remotely and make that work? So, each time, whoever said it, next, thanks, whoever said, don't waste a good crisis, there's always something to learn and apply it going forward. What comes next will not be like it is now, but there's definitely lessons to learn and ways that we've adapted that will have benefit no matter what the future looks like. So that's key. And one more. And just to remember, that both people and the world at large are resilient. We don't know if this is going to end in 3 months or 6 months or 2 years, but we will go on, and the world will continue. I guess the two great World War II quotes, right, were "keep calm and carry on," and that's always good advice. And the other one, sometimes attributed to Winston Churchill, but I'm not sure he said it, which is, when you're going through hell, just keep going, because we're going to come out on the other side. Next slide. So as we start to pivot and think about the future and think about developing a long-range plan, the first question on everyone's mind is, will this ever end? And yes, it will end, and especially as we look to the long term, we'll see differences. Next, please. But I think the key questions are, what are really, kind of the short-term conditions that we're living in, and whether short-term, again, is 6 months or 2 years or 3 years, versus what are systemic changes? What are the things that or COVID is really going to change in the long run? I was thinking back this morning to 9/11, and I'm an ex-New Yorker, and I used to go to meetings all the time in the World Trade Center, and I knew people who died that day. And that was as dramatic a shock as, for any of us in our lifetime, and maybe, will always be, just because of the singular moment of it, as opposed to kind of the long term of COVID. But now, almost 20 years later, what is it that's really changed? Yeah, there's more security around, and yeah, we have to take off our shoes when we go through the metal detectors at the airport. But in a lot of ways, the world has changed, but in a lot of ways, the world has recovered. So, next, please. So as we go forward, I think for the purposes of thinking about our region, not the world at large, but at least the greater Delaware Valley region, I think there are four key questions that we need to consider. First is, what is the future of teleworking? Right now, everybody's teleworking almost, but what's that going to look like, 5, 10, 20 years down the line? Will those trends continue? Next. Will COVID lead to location decisions for people and businesses? We've had a lot of growth in Philadelphia, people moving into the cities. Will that change? Will people start to think they don't want to be in as dense a community? Will they start making decisions about their families or about their businesses and where to locate? That's a big question. Next. Is there anyone on this call who's not gotten a home delivery over the last 2 months, right? What does the future look like? A lot of people in the retail world are very worried about, will people come back to the stores or will the trends towards online and deliveries and, permanently change the retail landscape? And next. And for us, a key one, when will people feel confident about returning to SEPTA and using transit? Those systems and those people who've been running them honestly have been heroes who've kept on the front line and kept things going. But the public needs to feel confident about getting on a bus or getting on a train, and the transit agencies are thinking real hard about that, what they can do to win trust and build confidence again. And one more, and finally, as we do any plan, we want to ask, what is it that we want to improve and how do we get there? And that's really the bottom line of the reason why we do long range planning. Next. So as we begin working now on our plan for the year 2050, we find ourselves in 2020, and DVRPC has been doing long-range planning for a long time. So we thought this was a good time to look back at the plans that we developed for the year 2020. We work, because as Tim mentioned, we work on a long horizon. This work was all done in the early 90s. So think back to conditions in the early 90s when we were developing the plan for 2020, and we'll talk a little bit about what we found. Next. So in the early 90s, we, as part of any of our long-range plans, we prepare forecasts. We prepared forecasts for regional population growth, employment growth, what is transit ridership likely to look like, number of vehicles, vehicle miles traveled, truck trips, etc. So again, this was prepared in the early 90s. This was the percentage growth rates in each of those factors. So now that we're in 2020, here's what actually happened. And proud to say we nailed the regional forecasts around population and employment, although some of the distributions, I won't swear we got every municipality right, but at a regional scale, we were right on target. Same with transit trips. The number of vehicles were a little bit less than we forecasted. Vehicle miles traveled were much less than forecast, which is good news for congestion on the roads. And truck trips were much more than we forecast, probably in large part because home delivery and those types of services. But overall, it's always important, and I'm glad that we were able to do this to get a reality check of why we do planning and the importance of long-range planning. Next. So in 2020, there were kind of three primary concerns at that time. Again, back in the early 90s, this was done in the early 90s, conditions that were the three key issues that we were trying to address as part of the plan. At that point, there was a tremendous amount of growth and really sprawl, I'd call it, in the suburbs. Farmland was being consumed at a rapid rate. That was the era of the McMansions and the 2-acre lots, and land was being consumed in our region at a rate of 1 acre an hour. So the plan called for really trying to limit new infrastructure in rural areas and trying to invest and concentrate growth in centers. And what we've seen by 2020 is next, significant growth in not just in Philadelphia, but in so many of the older boroughs around the region. Places like Phoenixville have boomed. Pottstown's doing well. Conshohockins, it just exploded. Malvern, so many of our older boroughs that were struggling have just seen a return of growth, and we're pleased to see that. And that's accompanied by slower land consumption in the suburbs. Next. So related to that, was this concern about loss of open space and loss of farmland. The plan said, let's be deliberate about that. Let's encourage more farmland preservation programs. Let's see the counties step up with their own efforts at land preservation. Let's try to protect key natural resources. Next, we set a goal for preserving 1 million acres of open space within the region, and now that it's 2020, almost 30 years after we developed the plan, we're well on our way towards achieving that goal. All the counties have instituted and taken active steps to preserve both farmland and open space in their jurisdictions. We're not that we've stopped the development, which was never the goal, but we've seen a real deliberate effort at preserving land, which is a great thing. Next. So the third major concern in developing our plan for 2020 was traffic. We saw these trends of congestion. At that point, transit ridership had been on a long-term decline. Even for us to forecast a moderate growth in transit went far against the current trends at that point. But as a plan, we said we want to invest in options to the auto. We want to invest in ways for people to get around without using their cars. So now that it's 2020, we've invested a lot in trails, the circuit trails being built all over the region. We're investing in operational improvements and ways to improve the roadway network. We've been investing in transit to provide more options for people. So doing a long-range plan has long-term but very real benefits, and that's why we do it. It's required under federal law, but for us, we think the plan provides a framework for decision making, not just by DVRPC, but by our members in the counties, by the states, by the DOTs, by the transit agencies. The plan provides a vision that people can look towards and work towards. So what we want to do today is to begin letting you help us think about what we need to do when we think about the year 2050. And we want to pivot from where we are today. We're all sitting at home and in our stay-at-home COVID world, but we want to get out of that. We want to look forward. We want to, that world will end and we will go back to our world as it was, but maybe different. So we're working, we have a current plan for the year 25, and now we're working on our plan for 2050. So with that, next, I think I turn it over to Brett Fusco, who's going to lead us through our exercises for the rest of the morning. Brett?
All right. Thank you, Barry. Thanks for that overview. Thanks again to Tim and the rest of TMACC for hosting us today. It's great to see so many people on the line here. Still somewhat early in the morning, given the COVID-19 reality that we're living in. So one of the things that we've had to do as we've started our 2050 outreach is adapt and pivot to the reality we face. And so we've been trying to very quickly move to an all digital outreach, which has some benefits, also some potential drawbacks and some concerns. But we found we've had a lot of success with these conversations through Zoom, and so hopefully we'll have a good conversation this morning with you. Before we jump into things too much, I think Barry gave a really great overview of the importance of long-range planning and why we do it. I think in our mind, or in a lot of your minds, probably you think DVRPC is largely a transportation infrastructure agency, but Barry talked about a lot of things beyond just transportation infrastructure. And the reality is our plan is broad and expansive because transportation is critical to getting us to everything we need or want to do. It's a circulation system of our communities. And as a result, we cannot just consider the transportation network in isolation. We must understand how it connects with our communities, the economy, the environment, and all the other facets of our life. And each plan update is an opportunity to evaluate and take stock of our current conditions. So, the present obviously is dominated by COVID-19, and we'll want to think about how to guide that eventual recovery from the pandemic. But we also want to think beyond our current situation, as Barry was saying, and identify an aspirational vision for the future of this region. And then in later steps in our outreach, we'll start to think about strategies to help bring that about. But really, in short, the plan is about setting a regional agenda and then helping to guide decision-making to bring about desired change. And I think we saw that in the 2020 plan example that Barry brought up this morning. So we're going to kind of dive in this morning and start getting right into some of our questions. And really, these questions relate to a series of questions that we're asking ourselves as long-range planners when we develop a long-range plan. And this first question thinks a lot about where are we now? And it's an important consideration for generating a vision for the region is to identify our shared values. So we're going to ask you to use the chat box in Zoom to tell us what you value most in Greater Philadelphia today. You could also think about this question in some other ways. Think of why you live here in the region. What brings value to your life in Greater Philadelphia? What do you like most about your community? What do you like about where we are now? And if you see an idea that's submitted in the chat box, voice that. Let us know, because repetition's one of those really important things for helping us understand what is kind of the things we value the most here in the region. The other thing we'll do is we'll we won't associate your name with your comment or response, so we respect your privacy and anonymity. So we will disassociate that after today's call. But feel free to jump in now and into the Zoom chat box and let us know what your thoughts are. I'm actually going to I'm going to hand things over to Stacy Bartels from DVRPC. And she's just going to kind of summarize what comes up through the chat box. So, Stacy.
Good morning, everybody. Thought I'd have a little music playing here. It's queued up, but it doesn't seem to be coming on. So I apologize. Yeah, looking for comments on this question. As Brett mentioned, if you see something that you have in your mind, please still write it down. Maybe you see something that you hadn't thought of, but you agree with, write that down as well. And let's see, I want to see how many people, first of all, I hope everybody puts something in. Looks like we have a lot of different answers coming up. Diversity a couple times. Let's see, walkability, yep. Arts and entertainment. Lots of green space. Yeah, that comes up a couple times. Green space and rural open spaces. Economic growth, that's a good one. Mass transit, not sure what it'll look like after COVID-19, that's true. That's one of the things we're going to be dealing with. Historic preservation, that's a new one here. Let's see. Museums, yep, arts, culture, museums, that came up a couple times. Entertainment. The people. Classic towns, yep, that was one of our programs, but definitely those older suburbs and some of the inner ring suburbs that are little communities in and of their own, walkable, accessible to transit, living and working and eating and shopping in the same spaces. Diversity and generosity of the people. Absolutely. Mass transit came up several times. Local food systems. Location, that's right. We're in between New York City and Washington, kind of halfway between the two, but we've got all the other kinds of geography and cities and towns around us, rural, mountains, beach. Walkability, that comes up quite a bit. We're very fortunate. Access to multimodal trails. You guys have a lot of good stuff. We're hoping a lot of this will still remain, but somebody did write it's food, and then that's a good thing, but it's also an uncertainty post-COVID. So, right, some of these things we're still not sure exactly when they're going to be open and available. Education, yes, we have a lot of educational opportunities here, not just our colleges and universities, but we have some great public schools and private schools in the area as well. Healthcare, for sure. Some associated with those universities, some on their own, but we've got some great ones here. Restaurants, yeah, I can't argue with that. Any kind of food, we can get it here. We're winding down. 3 public radio stations, that's an interesting one, and that's true. Yeah, a lot of places can't even get one in within their reach, so we're very lucky. Different formats too. Employment opportunities, let's hope that keeps up too. Great, Center City performance venues, yeah, that's the arts and culture. Parks and trails, very good, you guys are great. EAGLES, Eagles. Access to services for individuals with disabilities. Yeah, we are very lucky with that too. You're right. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up on this question, and we'll have another one coming right up. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. So we're actually going to jump from that question to somewhat its inverse. So again, we're still kind of thinking about where we are now. We're also starting to start thinking a little bit about looking forward as well. And so we're looking at, what concerns you when thinking about Greater Philadelphia in the future. We'll again ask you to put this responses into the chat box, and some other ways you might want to think about this question, or what are your main concerns? What worries you about future development in the region? Think also maybe Barry's example, the 2020 plan, which looked to prevent sprawl, congestion, worsening air quality, and urban disinvestment. What would be your top concerns, along those lines, but for today? Or you might also think about, what do you not like about where we are now? Again, we'll anonymize responses, so that your comment or response won't be associated with your name once we take things out of Zoom. And again, if you see a response you like, repeat it, put it in your own words. Repetition is a good thing for us. So I'm going to pass it back to Stacy, and she's going to do some exercise, just kind of summarizing some of the responses that we see coming in.
And this is outside of COVID, right, Brett? I mean, just to clarify that for people.
I mean, if COVID's a concern, and you want to focus on that, that's fine. But we're wanting to think also about a world beyond COVID. Right.
So it's interesting. Some of the things that people like also can come up as a concern. Somebody wrote lack of public transportation options. So it depends on where you are in our region whether public transportation is readily accessible, and that's a good point. We have racial and socioeconomic segregation and inequity has come up a couple times. Loss of open space, that was something a lot of people valued, and we don't want to see it lost. Safety of public transportation, are we going to be able to keep it clean and sanitary and, appropriate for everybody to ride? Floodplains are in the area of low-lying ground adjacent to rivers, so that's a climate change issue. Lack of funds to upgrade the infrastructure. Yep, funding is always at the top of the list. Yep, funding mechanisms for infrastructure. Loss of small businesses, that's interesting. We're really, really hoping that most small businesses can bounce back after COVID, but hoping to keep that secure, maintain their health as well as we move forward. Yeah, deteriorating infrastructure, very sure, very true. As Brett said, it can be something that concerns you today that you see, you know, impacting the future as well, or it can be something that could just be some looking forward from here. Life care community close to trail network and access to cultural institutions in the city. So for our aging population, that will be very important. Yeah, with more people potentially working from home, which hopefully can increase. Yep, we can use this to reduce roadway expenditures, reuse and adapt our roadways for increased bike ped use. That would be great. Yeah, always something that planners deal with, NIMBYism. Yeah, our reliance on state and federal funding, that's true. But I'm not sure how we're going to change that. We will continue to fight the good fight. Got about a minute left, everybody. So, you know, keep putting your ideas in there. Again, if you see something that you were like, oh, I was going to say that, still put it in. That helps us gauge how important that issue is overall to everybody. Effects of climate change on people and the natural built environment. Yep. Congestion, always. We'll see if we can mitigate some of that after so many people were working from home. Hopefully, as we slowly go back to work in the near future, that will not be as much of a problem. Accommodating the aging and disabled population, absolutely, absolutely. Technology will change everything very rapidly. So true. We couldn't possibly have imagined that we would have the technology at our fingertips now back in when we were planning for today, for 2020. And I'm guessing the same will be true as we look forward to 2050. The future of colleges and universities, very interesting. It's near and dear to my heart right now as I have 2 in college. So, but definitely, and especially because we have so many, we hope to keep them healthy. So that's about it. Wrap it up. If you have one more, stick it in there, but we got to move on. So thank you, everybody, for these great comments.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Stacy. Thanks, everyone, for your comments that you put in the slide. We want to just kind of quickly go over some of the thinking that we've had about what's likely to shape the future of this region going forward. And this really goes back to the second question that we ask ourselves when developing a long-range plan, which is where are we going? And so this is where we take stock of external forces that may drive change in the region. And the change that these forces generate could be good. It might not be so good. It might not, be something that we feel strongly about either way. But largely, these are things that we see as being external and largely beyond our ability to control. But they will impact our ability to achieve, the final vision that we set for the 2050 plan. And so to better answer the question, where are we going, we conduct a scenario planning exercise with our futures working group as part of the long-range planning process. This group is made up of subject matter experts from a variety of backgrounds, as well as members of the general public. A key part of this scenario planning exercise is to identify which forces are likely to have the greatest impact on the region and those that have the most uncertainty associated with them. For this update cycle, the Future Working Group identified 3 primary forces to focus their attention. The digital revolution, which has been reshaping the economy away from industrial era production and toward the creation of information and content. Rising inequality, which limits the just and fair inclusion in society where everyone can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. And climate change, which is the result of rising levels of greenhouse gases trapping heat in the atmosphere. So most of us are quite familiar with the rise of computers and the internet and smartphones, along with things like sensors and data storage capabilities that have made the digital revolution possible. Today, digital technologies are evolving around things like robotics, artificial intelligence, connected and automated vehicles, Internet of Things, which connects more and more everyday objects to the internet, 3D printing, and a whole load of other digital technologies. And the impacts of these technologies will take decades to play out and fully take effect. So some effects we may expect include creating new options in how we do things, facilitating greater customization and personalization, flattening the effect and cost of distance, and replacing low-skilled jobs with high-skill ones. And the uncertainty with the digital, there's any number of uncertainties with digital revolution. One way we could think about that is, what will be the rate of advances? Will the future look a lot like today, but with better technology, or will 2050 start to look more and more like a science fiction movie that's largely unrecognizable to us in the present? The second force we were looking closely at is growing income and wealth disparities at the national level. And these are things that propel disparities within regions like Greater Philadelphia. Even before the COVID-19 crisis, a seemingly strong economy was still leaving too many people behind. This situation is exacerbated as life is moving online due to shelter-in-place restrictions, potentially widening the digital divide that already existed. There's also growing disparity between regions. The digital revolution is centralizing economic growth in a handful of regional and mega clusters. These include places like San Francisco and the Silicon Valley, Seattle, San Diego, Austin, Boston, New York City within the United States. At the same time, many places are being left behind in this new digital economy, particularly former industrial hubs, small towns, and rural areas. Greater Philadelphia, being a part of the Northeast mega region, has some advantages and may benefit residents by being closely connected to other large regions and economic centers along the Amtrak Northeast Corridor high-speed rail line. But the uncertainty around the future of inequality, can be seen in a lot of different ways. But one we want to think about is, just what can and will be done to create a fairer, more just, and equitable society. The third force we are closely watching is climate change. This is actually a picture of Camden in New Jersey. Severe weather events and changes to our climate due to global warming pose threats to both the environment and the economy. In Greater Philadelphia, climate change is expected to increase precipitation and cause more frequent intense storms, along with rising temperatures and more variability, which is likely to mean more days with temperatures greater than 90 degrees. But damages may be greater in other parts of the nation and the world, so the region could still see an increase in things like climate refugees, though we aren't immune to climate risks ourselves either. While the science of climate change is very certain, there are so many unknowns about local level impacts, the speed at which climate change will occur, and what kind of secondary effects this will all have. Another major unknown is whether people in the region, country, and around the world will continue with business as usual, or take collective and immediate action needed to circumvent the worst effects of climate change, particularly by quickly moving away from fossil fuel-based energy. There are a number of ways these forces could interact. We give just a couple quick examples. Obviously, we could sit around and think of many other ways. One such way, though, is digital technologies are giving a lot more people a voice. Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and other movements have been major disruptors for social change. However, digital technologies also enable the spread of misinformation and hate, which can weaken the social fabric that holds us together. When we think about interactions between things like inequality and climate change, lower income households are generally more vulnerable to impacts of climate change. For example, lower income neighborhoods were recently found to have temperatures up to 20 degrees Fahrenheit higher than nearby more affluent neighborhoods within the city of Philadelphia. And thinking about interactions between climate change and the digital revolution, technology may help circumvent the worst effects of climate change. And as we've seen, it can help us to adapt to new normals, such as the current situation with COVID-19. So we want to use these forces to help us think about where we ultimately want to go in the future. This is the third question we ask ourselves when developing a long-range plan. Where do we want to be in 2050? The vision that we're developing as part of this outreach lies at the heart of our long-range plan, and you'll be helping us to identify what that is today. In future rounds of outreach, it'll also help us in identifying specific strategies that can help us to stay on the right track of where we want to go, rather than simply staying on whatever course external future forces may take us. So with that in mind, let's begin the next exercise. Please again go to the chat box and tell us your vision and our goals for Greater Philadelphia. You know, some other ways to think about this is, you know, think of your positive aspirational vision of the future, even if it's seemingly unattainable in the present day. You may also want to think about the future forces, and, you know, were there aspects of them that you like, or are there things that you would like to, you know, see us go in different directions than where the forces may be taking us? What goals would you like to see the region set and achieve? What do you hope to see happen? What developments would make you happy? And again, you know, we're looking for repetition and responses. So if you see something you like, you know, or strongly agree with, voice that. And so again, I'll pass it over to Stacy, who's going to summarize the comments as they come in.
Hello, everyone. Same drill as before. Just type your comments in there. As Brett mentioned, this is a pretty broad question. You can interpret it and answer in a couple different ways. But yeah, what do you see as good things that will be happening for the region, or your concerns for the region in the future? We already have some, you know, affordable housing issues and parochial thinking. Those are two things that we just have to keep our eye out for and help to benefit the first one. That would be great. It's 2050 and we stopped climate change. I hope. First class education system for K to 12. You know, the public education came up in the concerns just prior to this question. Expanding regional rail. More investment in our classic boroughs, sure. Increased bike connections, working at that every day, for sure. More economic growth and opportunity for all residents, so the equity issue. Greater investment in transit. 100% clean energy. More multimodal options, yep. Healthy economy, absolutely. Environment and easy access to work and play. 100% clean energy again, yeah. More unity, less division, definitely. Welcoming community where people from a variety of backgrounds and with a variety of belief systems can live in harmony with mutual respect. Yes, in an environmentally and economically sustainable way. Wow, might be able to use that one on one of our materials for a long-range plan. Let's see. Ability to get an affordable education, so keeping the education healthy, but also affordable, a stable job, and an affordable house for all. Yes. Seems like we have a lot of people commenting on climate change and fossil fuels, you know, getting away from fossil fuels and clean energy. There's the equity issue, of course, as we mentioned. We still have small businesses, that people aren't buying everything online. Yeah. Absolutely. Because they're key to keeping our boroughs and small towns healthy too, and that's a goal as well. Thriving downtowns, right. We need the small businesses for that. Become the model city that overcomes income inequality and poverty. Got a couple clean energy ones, fewer autos, yep. Little less than a minute left, keep them coming. Engagement in the technological revolution, right? Yeah, we can't be left behind. We have to be ahead of it, not behind it. Yeah, see that circuit, that bike trail build out, allowing about 80% of the region to access the multimodal superhighway. Yeah, that's an absolute great goal. I like that one. A thumbs up to all. These are the things we want, or that we need to be aware of as we're moving forward with our planning and just with our structure of our government and funding systems as we move into the future. Increase local food availability and diversity. Be in an autonomous vehicle environment. Yeah. Fresh food for all. And yes, continuing to break down physical barriers in the region. Yes, accessible for everyone. And I think someone mentioned that earlier about having access for seniors and for people with disabilities. And we have to make sure that all the benefits we have are accessible to all of them. Yep, sounds like we're about done. You can quickly put some more in, but Brett's going to move on at this point. And thank you very much, everybody.
All right, so just real quickly to kind of wrap things up here. So our long-range plan started around a year ago, a little over a year ago, with identifying alternative future scenarios. We have a report coming out on that. We have since been working on identifying current conditions. We have a new interactive indicator platform called Tracking Progress up that gives a whole series of different indicators about how the region's doing relative to goals in the long-range plan. Right now, we're working on the public outreach around an aspirational vision, and we'll be coming back in our next round of outreach to think about strategies to achieve that vision. And then later on, we'll put out a draft plan for public comment and aiming to present to the DVRPC board for adoption sometime in probably the late summer of 2021, so next year. So we welcome you to stay engaged with the plan. You can check out the plan's website, dvrpc.org/2050. Feel free to sign up for DVRPC's newsletter, follow DVRPC on social media. We don't have time for questions today, but if you do have specific questions in the plan that you'd like to discuss further, feel free to reach out to either myself or my colleague, Jackie Davis. There's our contact information. And once again, thank you to everyone for participating today. Thank you so much to our hosts, TMACC. I'm going to pass it back over to them with some concluding thoughts and to wrap things up.
Thank you so much, Brett. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It has been eye-opening. It's just the planning process that we need to get through. As I've said from the beginning, the COVID-19 has had a beginning. I think we are finally towards the middle of it, and it will have an end. And how we manage through the end is, how strong we will be. And that's what our focus has been in all of our presentations and those things that we write. So thank you, Barry, for your insight. Thank you, Brett, for all that you've done. And then the DVRPC, the team that's behind the scenes that's here. I do have a poll that I'd like to share with everybody. Let me close. Let me open up this poll here and launch it so everybody can see it. What are your feelings been towards work from home now? I feel supported and productive. I feel unprepared and unequipped. I get more work done in less time. I prefer working from home, and I prefer working at the office. I know that this is a unique time for us. We've been tracking. We've been having a lot of conversations with some employers on this issue. Thank you, everybody, for loading this in. We have 27. Great. Just a couple more seconds here as everyone makes their final decisions. Great. About 10 more seconds if you haven't voted. There we go. We're at 81%. Thank you. 47. Okay, great. So there's that. And then I'll share the results with everybody. So it's interesting to feel that there is a mix here between, I feel supported and productive from working from home, but everybody does prefer working at the office. I guess it's that office family that we do enjoy during the day. It breaks things up. Where this poll question actually came from is actually from something that we are about to launch for us for here in Chester County. We have been working with a researcher at Duke University Center for Advanced Hindsight. This is a human behavioral analysis that they're doing at Duke. They're doing it in partnership with Harvard Business School and LA Metro. They're in the process of conducting a nationwide study of behavioral and attitudes around remote working, as many positions and organizations transition to remote work operations in light of COVID. TMACC is partnering with Duke University on this study so that we can look at getting a baseline for Chester County. We have engaged several of our chambers in the county, so thank you very much. A couple of them are on the call today. We will be sending out the personalized link for Chester County. We need to find 500 individuals here in Chester County that are willing to take this survey. I think that should be relatively easy. When we do get that response back from those 500 individuals, we will get that aggregated information from Duke study, from the Duke study, so that we'll have this to see where Chester County is looking at a work from home in that nature. So please watch your inbox. Jonathan will be sending that out in the next day or so for our engagement, as well as our chamber partners. The last thing that I'd just like to remind everybody, I appreciate everybody's investment and membership in TMACC. It does mean a lot for us. It means a lot for us right now in this moment. We do not have great opportunities to raise sponsorship dollars. Your membership in TMACC helps us engage other grant opportunities, such as our TMA and MAP grant, and that's how we stay in operation. We are fully staffed at this time, continuing to do the work. A lot of it is focused around bicycling and work from home activities, making sure that we're doing that efforts to reduce the number of SOVs, but also showcasing that it is an environment that we can work in. As your membership does come up during this period of COVID, yesterday I had to, sign up for renew our membership in our sister organization to ACT, which is a national organization. And I was like, well, it is tough times, and we understand it's tough times. But what we get out of ACT and the dialogue and presentations like this, that's where I find the value. So I strongly encourage you to continue your support in TMACC as we go through these times, so we can continue to do the work. And as I said, when we come out the back end, much stronger as an organization. With that, I think we're going to close out the program, but we will leave the window open for a while. If you want to take your microphone off of mute and you want to talk with somebody or share some thoughts with groups of people, it's always the value of the network. And if you do have that 9 o'clock meeting that you need to jump on, you can sign off now. So again, thank you from the staff from DVRPC, and look forward to having all of this programming posted in the Monday morning memo. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Tim. Take care. Take care, all.